And good morning, everybody. My name is David Lynch. I'm the city manager for the city of Newton Falls, Ohio, and this is our regular coronavirus morning briefing for the date of April 8th, 2020. It's good to be with you, everybody. As you know, we do these morning briefings so you have a little bit of local information as to what's happening in our area and our community, but we ask you to rely on, for accurate health information, on the Director of Health, Amy Acton, and keep an eye on the governor's briefings. Those really are the rules for the state of Ohio. We'll talk about local things, but we don't want to do anything that contradicts what the governor and Director of Health is doing. This morning we have an outstanding resource. Our wonderful congressman for the 13th District here in our United States House of Representatives on the line with us to tell us a little bit about what's going on at the federal level is our own Congressman Tim Ryan. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, David.
Thanks for being with us so early. Tim, the question on everyone's mind around Northeast Ohio is the federal stimulus got passed, but so far we're not seeing that much of what's going on. Can you give us some direction?
Yeah, so it was over a $2 trillion package that was meant to do two things. One, help with public health issues, and the other, help with the economic blowback that's happening because the country basically is shutting down due to all of these stay-at-home orders in all the different states. And so on the one end, it's unemployment insurance extension at the federal level. That's about $600 a week. So on average, the average worker in the country will be basically made whole, meaning between the state unemployment and the federal unemployment, they'll be making what they were making while they were working. There'll be a $1,200 one-time payment for everybody that makes under $75,000 a year. There'll be a $2,400 payment for couples that make under $150,000, and then $500 per kid. That'll be coming hopefully in the next month or so. And then there's hundreds of billions of dollars for businesses, basically to keep their workers working and still meeting payroll, and they will get a loan from the Small Business Administration through their banks that will be forgiven if they keep their people on the payrolls. And the reason we want to do this is hopefully once we get through the coronavirus, that businesses will still have their employees intact to quickly start back up so we can get out of this coronavirus depression, recession, whatever you want to call it, with everybody in line. Now, they're burning through that money, so we are going to do, hopefully quickly, maybe even this week, another hopefully few $100 billion to go both to the hospitals. And so in the last package, there was $100 billion for hospitals like Mercy and Stewart and the old Robinson over in Portage County, Summa, because they're dealing with a crisis now, and they need the protective equipment, they need the ventilators, the staff hours, and all of that. And as of 2 days ago, I got on a piece of legislation to give these frontline workers a $25,000 one-time payment, whether they're retail, nurses, first responders, because they're basically deserve hazard pay at this point. They're not getting it. You look at people, if they're in the retail at the supermarkets, whether it's Aldi's or Mark's or Giant Eagle, they're on the front lines. And so they deserve some hazard pay. So I'm pushing for them to get that one-time payment of $25,000 for their hazard pay.
That is really outstanding. Tim, you and your staff have been working with my staff, and we appreciate all the help you've given us. One of the things that we've been talking about that I want you to illuminate right now, if you can, is the difficulty we're having as it relates to municipal governments. We have two sources of revenue I mentioned in yesterday's morning briefing. One is our 1% payroll tax, which I use to pay police, and it's generating very little right now because people aren't working, they're obeying the orders. In addition to that, our police are on a ticket issuance slowdown, and that's by virtue of complying with the state requirements as well, and that's another source of how I pay police. So we're doing what we're being told to do, but the stimulus money seems to be geared towards large communities, with it being unclear whether or not small communities are going to be able to survive. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, this is a real concern. And so we were able to get some money in the last bill It went directly to cities over 500,000 people. The only city in Ohio was Columbus.
Right.
The other piece is two other things. One, there'll be state and local support that'll go to the state of Ohio, and then I think they're going to get about $4 to $4.5 billion. They will then figure out how to get that to all the local cities and municipalities and townships. And then there was an increase in the community development block grant program, so that can maybe help local communities shift around. Now, I know we are pushing, as of this week, another $125 billion for state and local governments. And my hope, it's tough because we're not in D.C. to be able to yell and scream,
Yeah,
and try
right.
to get
Well, that
get
never
some
happens.
attention. But that 125 billion, I want it to go directly to Newton Falls. I want it to go directly to
Right.
Niles and Warren, as opposed to have to trickle down through the state. And you hope the state has a formula that is, appropriate for Newton Falls to be able to get some money. I want that money to go directly, and more community development block grant money. And I think Akron got their community development block grant money. They're doing a local revolving loan fund for their small businesses to help, help cushion some of the blow for them. So you got to get creative too, but we're going to try to double down on what we did last week.
Sure. Tim, I know you have another appointment, and so we're going to wrap up here, but just give us a brief note of what it's like on a personal basis to be a United States Congressman trying to guide our nation through maybe one of its greatest crisis moments.
Well, as I tell people, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. I mean, we are, working very closely with the local hospitals, the local public health, the local EMA. I'm either texting or talking to the governor every day, probably for the last 3 or 4 weeks, or John Husted or somebody at the state level. We're trying to get masks made. We've got local companies that are helping us with some of these personal protective equipment for our police and fire and frontline healthcare workers. But then at the same time, I get a call from, the Newton Falls and saying, hey, we need some money for this. So I'm trying to take what we're doing locally to Washington, D.C. to make sure that the packages that we're putting together are reflective of the needs of people in the local community. And this is all happening, at the same time. And then we bought a power washer, and I'm in charge of power washing my porch and my house too.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to try to. My wife is at home; she's a teacher, and our kids are all at home. So
Yeah.
we're trying to get some household chores done too in between meetings and Zoom calls. But it's very, very hectic, and But hey, these frontline workers they're the heroes here,
Yeah.
David. They're in the hospitals with the people with COVID-19 and coronavirus and all the rest. And so we're trying. We got a really cool thing we're going to announce today. So stay tuned with some help for the frontline workers and some of the local restaurants. We got a pretty cool thing we're going to do in the next day. So we're just trying to cover all angles here. And, we just got the Covelli Center up and running, or approved, I should say, from the state. The Ohio National Guard's coming in. So we'll have about 250 beds at the Covelli Center to absorb any of the overflow from the local hospitals. We had an outbreak at Elkton Prison. And so we're trying to get those prisoners to the different local hospitals and plugging them in. Actually, we got some out to Suma and in Summit County.
Oh my
so
gosh.
It's like,
Yeah, what next?
It just keeps coming.
Yeah,
so
the
we're
hits just keep on coming.
Just keeps on coming. But hang in there. It was great to be with you, and you guys take care. We'll always love Newton Falls.
All right, thank you so much, Congressman Tim Ryan. Peace be with you,
care.
and good health to you and your family.
God bless.
Yeah, bye, Tim. And that's his contact information that you see on your screen, 330-740-0193. And also his email address, tim.ryanwebb@mail.house.gov. And we'll leave that up on the screen for just a moment so you can write that down. Congressman Ryan has been very helpful, and his office is accepting constituent inquiries, and that's why we put that information up on the screen. Go ahead and contact him, as we've been doing on a regular basis from the office of the city manager at Newton Falls. Well, I'm going to move on to a different topic right now and talk a little bit about an issue that I've received a number of phone calls about, and that has to do with the congregation of children, that is, kids, at different places around town. We want the kids to understand that we love them and we want them to be healthy. But we have a number of young people that we are receiving information on, anecdotally and by reports of our police, where the kids are congregating. That's what kids will do when there's no school. They'll congregate. But part of the difficulty is that kids being kids, they are resisting keeping their social distance. And we're getting these calls. Yesterday I had a call from a young lady that talked about the fact that there are a number of young people, youths, that were congregating outside the Dairy Queen. And by the way, the Dairy Queen is open. That's a good thing, but you've got to keep your social distance. And so parents, guardians, those that have a chance to talk to some of these young folks, those young folks that are watching right now, keep that social distance. In this environment, keeping that 6-foot distance is a matter of life and death. Wear masks to whatever extent you can, especially when you're out and about. That's not mandatory, but that will help as well. So please keep your social distance. The other thing I want to talk about is that we've gotten some complaints about people getting their hair cut and their hair styled because of the fact that the hair salons are all closed. Well, we all have a certain degree of vanity in ourselves, and we've been getting these reports on a quasi-regular basis, reports of hair salons that are sneaking people in the back door and they're meeting their special clients inside the salon, or maybe having people go over to their house and they're cutting their house in their garage or their basement. You should not be doing this. It's a direct violation of the state law. It is a misdemeanor of the second degree, which carries with it a penalty of 90 days in jail and $750 fine. Now, are we going to be that kind of autocratic state where we go around hunting people down for getting a haircut? No. The reason the curve is flattening a little bit right now is because people have been self-compliant. They're protecting one another. You are not protecting one another. You're not protecting me. You're not helping my family if you're sneaking in a haircut. And on that subject, take a look at the terrible haircut that I have right now. When I walked in, I was going to confess that I'd been scalped because, you know, this is originally Indian territory. Well, the fact is that my wife is in another location where she's been for weeks taking care of her 95-year-old mother. So I'm living in Newton Falls all by myself, and I've got no one to cut my hair in my house. So I put on my mask and I bought a very cheap set of hair clippers. And the result is the atrocity of a haircut that you're looking at right now. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wear that haircut as a badge of honor, that I am compliant. Can you be compliant? Do you care about your family? Do you care about your neighbors? Do you care about that person you're sneaking into to get your haircut done or your hair styled? The only way we can solve this problem is if we unite together. During World War II, people had to do things for themselves. They had something called a victory garden, where they raised their own food in their own backyard so that we could be united in the effort to quash the enemy. And in our case, the enemy's invisible, and it's all around us. But we can defeat it, that coronavirus, if we all work together. Please think about these things as you go about your daily lives. Well, that's bringing us towards the end of this broadcast. One thing I wanted to mention, I always close each broadcast by talking about the situation in terms of your relationship with God and keeping the prayers going. And it called to mind to me one of my favorite scenes in all of film. And that scene is, well, towards the end scenes in a film called The War of the Worlds, not the Tom Cruise version, but the original version that starred Gene Barry. I think it was made back in the 1950s. Anyways, in this scene, Martians are destroying the world, destroying all of humanity, but the director of the film decided to include a scene where people are gathered in church. They're on their knees praying. In fact, in this scene, part of the church is partially destroyed, yet people on their knees praying, making the sign of the cross. Some of them are holding their rosary beads, but in any case, they're turning to God for solution, for answer and support. And as you know, by the end of the movie, their prayers were answered. The Martians were destroyed, and civilization was able to be rescued from this terrible menace that was threatening the world. Well, we're going through something like that right now, and it's not fictional. It's something that's real. And every man, woman, and child in Newton Falls needs to know that you can play a role. Follow the governor's instructions. Watch his press briefing that he does at 2 o'clock about every day. Watch what the president's doing. Follow these recommendations, and most importantly, do your part. And as I've always mentioned at the closing, your part means turning to God and asking Him to help. It has happened historically in our nation over the many, many decades, and it can happen now as well. We're seeing some small signs of progress. Let's encourage that progress by keeping our social distance, wearing the masks that we can, and being sensible in terms of protecting one another. And as I mentioned again, turn to God. Those prayers really do make a difference. Well, that's the edition this morning. God bless America, and God bless the city of Newton Falls.